Dare to enter Crow's Quill's books, where tales of forgotten realms and fearless souls come alive. Today's journey, Plato Wyngard and the Valley of the Immortals, chapters 29 to 30, by Mark and James Lindsay. Will you uncover the truth hidden in the shadows? Chapter 29. As Plato and Huyn lay under cover trying not to get killed, they didn't realize that the cavalry in the form of Nat and Luther was on the way, both moving in from different directions. Nat was stealthily ducking and weaving through the screaming throng. Despite being armed, he was largely ignored. Luther, on the other hand, was like a bull elephant. A good foot taller than most of the locals he pushed past. He was a frightening figure, huge and imposing, a fearsome look of reckoning written across his black face. He looked like a runaway train plowing through a field. Even he was shocked at the sight of dozens of dead and dying figures lying around the two gunmen the Viper had left. Raising the heavy Mag 58 onto his shoulder, he pointed it roughly in their direction and squeezed the trigger. The reassuring recoil backing into his shoulder as the large caliber 7.62 rounds chewed up one of the gunmen, lifting him off his feet and throwing him several feet in the air. He landed on the bodies of several already deceased farmers. The gunman's large exit wounds signified that he wouldn't be getting up again. Ever. The other gunman was quick and lucky. As his colleague was riddled with slugs, he had been able to dive and roll, using the dead at his feet as cover and concealment. He was able to crawl to a better vantage point where he immediately returned fire towards Luther. The Viper was also aware of the crossfire his men were encountering. Realizing that he was now facing an unknown and possibly larger force, he immediately called in for reinforcements. A squad of around a dozen men the Viper had left in reserve were now minutes from joining the melee. In the meantime, the Viper planned to keep Plato and Co. busy using the confusion of the marketplace to his advantage. Despite his earlier luck, the lone gunman was now facing three foes, all located in different directions. With Nat closing in as well, he attempted to keep all four at bay. But every time he fired back, he revealed his position until Nat took the fight, as well as his head, with a clear single shot from his L1A1 self-loading rifle. With no immediate threats, Plato, Luther, Nat, and Huyn moved in close. Careful to maintain a small ring of interlocking arcs, they surveyed their immediate area for any signs of danger. "What the hell happened?" Plato asked. "I don't know. All I heard was gunfire, and I responded." "Same here," Nat replied. Huyn was silent. "Huyn, have you got something to add?" Plato asked. Although he was afraid, he already knew what the answer would be. "It was me. I have no excuse. I tried to take out the Viper, and failed," Huyn said, realizing the destruction around them was partially his fault. No time for apologies. Everyone give me a state," Plato said, in a cold, professional voice. "No injuries, at least 600 rounds for the pig," Luther said. "I'm fine. I've got about 150 rounds for the L1, Nat said. "Apart from lost skin, I'm fine. I have about 180 for my AK, Huyn said. Plato reslung his shotgun and retrieved a Heckler & Koch HK-33 from the dead gunman, as well as 5 magazines of ammunition from his pouches. "I'm good too," Plato replied. "Plato, as glad as I am that you're all alive, I have some bad news." Bian's voice crackled over the radio. "What is it?" Plato asked. "I can't see the Viper and the other 2 men he had with him," Bian said. "Understood," Plato replied, giving the other 3 men the signal to keep a lookout. "Also, there are 3 jeeps loaded with men moving from the west towards the markets. From what I can make out, they're heavily armed and dressed the same as the Viper's men, Ban said, worried. You've done well. Keep out of sight, and with your help, we may just get out of this alive, Plato instructed. You all heard her? We have incoming. Let's not make it easy, Plato said, and the other three men nodded. With the brief respite, Plato and the others were now really able to take stock of the carnage around them. The market was deathly silent. Most of the vendors and patrons were long gone. Only the dead and wounded remained. As much as they wanted to help those poor souls who were groaning and crying, their only option was to prepare for the coming confrontation. The Viper, who had originally planned on flanking Plato, was now holding a rear position, waiting for his reinforcements to arrive. His plan was to move quickly and without mercy, just like his namesake. Plato had now organized the others and created a barricaded position from which to fight back, using carts, crates, and boxes which looked more like a wagon train than a fortified position. They now waited for the Viper and his men to move against them. Plato hoped that a few surprises they had implemented would slow them down sufficiently. This would allow Plato to get back the advantage. The 3 jeeps stopped short of the market, and the men within climbed out quickly and formed an arrowhead. Penetrating the western side of the markets, they carefully moved towards the location of the Viper, firing at anything they deemed as a threat. Any locals they encountered along the way were dealt with swiftly and without remorse. The head scout picked up a visual of the Viper, and they converged upon him, forming a lethal perimeter around their commander and awaited further orders. The Viper spoke slowly but efficiently, detailing his plan of attack, which was to hit Plato and his men with 2/3 of his force, and while they were tied up, he would take the other third and hit them from the right flank, cutting up whatever was left. Judging by the ground around him, he saw this as the quickest and most efficient way to deal with this pesky problem. Little did he realize that Plato had an ace up his sleeve. Bian. Can you tell me what you can see? Plato asked. They're not moving at the moment. There's about a dozen men protecting the Viper in a big circle. From what I can tell, he's talking to them and pointing in different directions, Bian said. He's giving orders. Can you tell where he's pointing? Plato asked. Towards you, but he's also pointing north. Does this help? Bian asked. You bet it does. Keep up the good work, Plato said. He put the radio away, then regarded the others with a grin. Cocky bastard is planning a left flank on us, using the manager's hut as a staging area. Luther, do you think you can organize a suitable greeting for them? Plato asked his large partner. You bet your ass I can, Luther said with a lopsided grin. As per the Viper's plan, the bulk of his men advanced on Plato's position, slowly and cautiously. Knowing they had the larger force, they were nevertheless wary of the Englishman's reputation as a special ops soldier, and once rounds were being exchanged, there would be no quarter given by either side, as the stakes were too high. The area was eerily calm, and the forward scouts were anxious about why they hadn't been engaged yet. What they weren't aware of was that the area leading towards Plato's fortified bunker had been roughly cleared, with any available carts positioned into a crude funnel, with the sole purpose of creating a narrow kill zone for Plato to engage the Viper's men. Unable to move into an extended line towards their limit of exploitation, the Viper's men instead continued up into the funnel. Despite their caution, the forward scout kicked a thin wire that had been rigged to a grenade. Almost effortlessly, the pin slid out, and 4 seconds later, the grenade exploded, sending deadly fragments into the bodies of the forward scouts. One was killed instantly. The other, his spinal cord severed, survived an additional 4 minutes. Plenty of time to lie there and listen to the battle unfold until his ruptured heart gave out. As soon as the grenade went off, Nat and Huyn fired short, controlled bursts down into the kill zone, creating death and mayhem. Those who weren't killed or wounded attempted to flee the funnel only to set off more booby traps that were positioned along the edges. Unaware of the predicament of his men, the Viper was now moving in from the far left flank. With a small cadre of troops, the intention of catching Plato and his team committed to fighting his main force and unprepared and unable to deal with a secondary force. Plato had pulled back to another secure area located centrally between both teams, with several reasons in mind. It would be easier to control and make decisions when not personally under fire, and he could assist either team if required. Either team could withdraw to his position and count on him to give covering fire. So far, things were going according to plan. The Viper could hear the commotion of the gun battle, but as yet was completely in the dark about where the balance of power swung. The manager's stone hut was situated just ahead, with its giant clock tower looming overhead. He could feel his prize was nearly within his grasp. He just had to eliminate this one pesky threat, and it would be his. The Viper's flanking team were spread out sufficiently in order to maximize their destructive damage when they eventually engaged the Englishman and his team of rogues. Everything was going well right up to the point where Luther started to fire into the unsuspecting flanking team from his position on the stone hut. With his elevated position, he was not only able to easily see the Viper and his men approach, but he was also able to direct devastating fire onto their position. Most didn't even see it coming, as Luther was able to pick off the Viper's men with well-aimed bursts of fire. Ever the survivor, the Viper was able to get cover before Luther's well-trained eye caught him in the open. Utilizing the radios and Plato's fire control orders, Nat and Huyn were able not only to halt the movements of the main force, but actually deliver a crushing defeat. With only a couple of men left alive, they had refused to surrender, but they were so suppressed that they had literally been made ineffectual. Luther had also managed to eliminate the Viper's flanking force through superior firepower. Now only the Viper himself remained alive, but rendered impotent to progress further. With Luther on the roof of the hut vigilantly preventing further movement, Plato now ventured forward, intent on flushing out the Viper. Instead of taking the Viper head-on, Plato took a long right arc intending to flank the enemy flank. The Viper lay amid the debris of bullet-ridden carts and crates, shocked that what he had considered would be an easy assault had now become a disgraceful defeat. In fact, he was considering the unimaginable. He might even die here today. Checking his weapon and ammunition, he did the only thing he could under the circumstances: prepare for a counter-assault. If he were to die today, it wouldn't be from lack of effort on his part. Peering up from behind a crate, he surveyed the area between him and the hut, trying to work out the best way to move forward without identification, when the sound of a safety catch clicked behind him. The Viper froze. Don't even think about it. I want you ever so slowly to place both hands on top of your head and interlock the fingers. Any sudden movements, and I'm going to ventilate the back of your head. Nod slowly if you understand, Plato said calmly. The Viper nodded, then did as he had been instructed. Plato moved forward with his assault rifle trained on the Viper's head. Approaching from the Viper's feet, he placed a knee on the Viper's lower back and with one hand grasped the interlocked fingers on the head. Now with full control, he slung his weapon and proceeded to tie the Viper's wrists behind his back, so tight that the colonel's hands were turning red. The Viper winced at the pain of his restraints. Be thankful that's all I do to you. However, the day's not over, so watch what you say and do, Plato growled into his ear. Luther remained on the roof, watching carefully for movement, with Bian also keeping a vigil for enemy signs. They were both able to keep an eye on Plato as he moved in with the Viper in tow. With the colonel's cooperation, they were able to force the surrender of the remaining men of the Viper's ill-fated assault. He was shocked by the fact that of all of the men he had brought with him, only 2 badly wounded soldiers were all he had left. After they were given basic first aid, they were tied up and left behind, as Plato dragged the Viper with the rest of the team following closely behind. They stood by the area marked on the ground with the image of the yellow dragon, the place Plato hoped was the resting place of Chu Dong-tu. Plato pushed the Viper roughly to the ground and regarded him with distaste. The Viper returned his gaze, despite his vulnerability. "So, you have me. What now?" the Viper asked coldly. "Whatever we damn well want," Luther growled, the answer evident if he had his way. "Don't address me, you wretched mongrel," the Viper replied. Luther stepped forward and was about to deliver a well-aimed boot into the colonel's midsection, but was stopped at the last minute by Plato. "That's right. As a prisoner of war, I—" "Shut your mouth. You are my prisoner. But this isn't war, murderer," Plato said. The Viper was about to reply, but the look he received from Plato warned him against it. "You'll speak only when I give you permission, and even then, it'll only be to reply specifically to my questions. Or I'll hand you over to them," Plato said, indicating Luther and Huon. The Viper nodded, although it was obvious to everyone that he was furious at being spoken to in such a manner. "Are there any more of your men out there? If you're lying and we are attacked again, I'll be sure to put a well-placed bullet into your spinal column, ensuring you'll never move again." "Understood?" Plato said. The Viper nodded. "All the men I had were committed to this assault. There is no one else," the Viper answered. "Didn't do you much good, did it?" Luther said cheekily. The Viper tried to ignore the ex-Marine, although the comment made him blush with anger. "What were your outcomes for the day supposed to be?" Plato asked. There was a long silence. Plato was about to repeat the question. "Get the 3rd statue and kill you," the Viper replied. "I'm curious. Where have you been getting the information about the Immortals and the Jade Cup?" Plato asked. Again, another long silence, only this time, no answer. "You're obviously aware that we have our own information in regard to the whereabouts of the Immortals and the Cup, so I'll ask again. Where are you getting this information?" Plato asked. "The general has everything about to these legends on ancient tablets. Not that it will help you dogs," the Viper responded. Luther was about to kick the Viper, but again was restrained by Plato, who then let him go, shrugging. "Just once," Plato said with a smirk. Luther struck the colonel in the side and everyone heard the snapping of a rib. The Viper grimaced but did not cry out. "Again, I'll ask you to watch what you say." There was a pause as Plato thought about his next line of questions. "I'm curious. Why were you heading towards the manager's hut?" Plato asked. "To get the 3rd statue. What else would I be doing here?" The Viper replied with a slight wheeze. This answer was received with a chuckle from Plato. "Well, I'm glad to see that with all the money the general has at his disposal, he still doesn't have all the answers," Plato said. This time the Viper was viewing Plato with narrow-eyed suspicion. "I can see that I've got your attention, haven't I? Well, since it's not going to help you, I'll let you in on a little secret. You were about to look in the wrong place. In fact, the closest you've gotten to the resting place of Chu Dong-tu is right now, sitting on your butt," Plato said. The Viper and the others all looked down at where the colonel was lying, the yellow brick image of the yellow dragon hidden beneath him. 20 minutes later, with the aid of some farming tools, they had managed to remove the heavy cobblestones and unearth 3 feet of dirt when Luther's shovel hit something hard but hollow at the same time. Huyn and Nhat leapt into the pit and helped Luther to continue to remove the earth, using only their hands and being careful not to damage the object within. They hoisted a small rectangular box from the hole, 2 feet by 1. The box was constructed from a tough metal alloy. On the top was written, "How did Chu Jong-tu ascend to heaven?" On the side of the box was a heavy steel locking mechanism with 3 keyholes, each with an image lined up beside it. One was a fish, the second a stick and hat, and the third a sword. Plato examined the mechanism, and he remembered the monk. Going through his bag, he produced the brass key that he had kept in his possession. On the side of the key was the image of a leaf. "Earth," Plato whispered, and slid the key in. A perfect fit. "Obviously there is only one correct answer, so which one is it?" Luther asked. "And what happens if we guess wrong?" Nhat replied. Plato exhaled. "Any ideas?" Plato asked. Silence. He picked up the radio, quickly filling Bian in on their dilemma. "Any thoughts?" There was silence as Bian mulled this question over. Most people would assume that the sword is the answer, as it is common knowledge that Chu Jong-tu's father-in-law feared rebellion. Others always associate fishing and contemplation with Chu Jong-tu, but it was a stick and hat that he turned into a castle. "That is what eventually led to his ascension," Bian said. "Are you sure?" Plato asked. "Fairly," Bian replied. Plato put the radio down. "She seems fairly certain," Plato said. "She said fairly?" Nhat interjected. "Well, it's more of an idea than anyone else has. Plus, it's a 1 in 3 chance. I've gambled more and lower odds before," Luther said. "He's right. Plus, we don't have much time to sit around in contemplation," Plato said. Holding his breath, he turned the key. Other than the latch cracking open, nothing untoward happened. Everyone let out a sigh of relief. Plato gave the nod for the box to be opened. Inside was an object cloaked under a gray plain cloth, and tucked into the lid was a complex mechanism of cogs attached to a bottle of black liquid. "Well, at least we know what would have happened if we guessed wrong," Plato said, and made a gesture with his hands denoting an explosion. After calling her into their position, Bian was given the honor of removing the cloth, exposing the statue of a yellow stone dragon. The Viper was visibly upset at the fact that foreigners had not only defeated him, but had been able to deduce the resting place of one of his country's national treasures. Plato picked up on this straight away. "Don't feel too bad. I have an excellent team of experts," Plato said, and everyone except the Viper broke into laughter. This was too much for him. "Laugh while you have the opportunity, because once the general and the wraith get hold of you, you'll wish you were never." The Viper was interrupted by the rifle butt wielded by Nhat, delivered to the side of the head. The result was immediate and satisfying. "I think on that note we should get going," Plato said. "Not until I receive satisfaction," Huyn interrupted, unholstering his pistol and preparing to use it on the unconscious Viper. That's not going to happen," Plato said, and Luther was about to intervene when Huyn aimed the pistol at the ex-marine. "There is no way I'm leaving this piece of filth to live another hour. I appreciate everything that you've done for me, but I can't let this go," Huyn said apologetically. "We all have an axe to grind against this man. But can't you see that we're involved in something bigger? Besides, if you do this, aren't we no better than he?" Plato argued. I don't give a crap. He deserves to die. I can't walk away now, my family. Your family would understand. I'm sure they wouldn't want to see you become this shell of a man. Bian pleaded. They're right, man. I have nearly as much right to want to see him dead. But not like this, Luther said, moving slowly forward. Huyn's indecision made it easy for Luther to disarm him. Tears had started to appear in the pirate's eyes. Plato stepped forward and clasped a hand on his shoulder. You'll look back on this and know that you've done the right thing here, Plato said. I hope you're right, Huyn replied, letting himself be led away, casting one last look at the butcher who had killed his family. Chapter 30. Plato and his team departed from the carnage and destruction of the markets, the unwarranted deaths of dozens of local farmers, taking a heavy toll on them all. As they disappeared into the distance in one of the Viper's jeeps, their exit went unnoticed, except for 3 pairs of eyes, sitting covertly in the tree line. The smallest of the 3 replaced his binoculars with a weary sigh. It is done, the small figure said in a troubled voice. And almost exactly to plan, one with a milky-colored eye replied, with a hungry grin. The outcomes, yes, but not the collateral damage, the smaller figure said, casting his eye over the strewn corpses. That has never been our concern before, the one with the milky eye said firmly. It's no secret, Malachi, that you are tainted with a bloodlust, the largest of the 3 added. Malachi spun around to face the other 2 men. And what if I am Gabriel? As long as I am sanctioned by the divine ones, I am completely justified in my actions. Besides, this massacre was caused by others, not me. So keep your petty mulings to yourself, Malachi challenged. The large one known as Gabriel took a deep breath but remained silent, the look of distaste hard to remove. Silence, the both of you, the smaller figure said, growing, weary with what was an ongoing argument. Your will, Kailin, Gabriel and Malachi replied together. He's right, though. This is not our concern. Only the retrieval of the Jade Cup, which thanks to the ex-SAS captain, is now becoming a reality. Kailin was cut short as the sound of a helicopter could be heard in the distance. The recognizable whumping sound of a Bell UH-1 Iroquois, or as it was nicknamed affectionately by U.S. servicemen as a Huey, hovered over the horizon. The 3 men watched its arrival with interest. It looks like the Wraith wasn't slowed down too long, Malachi commented. From her dossier, we knew she would be near impossible to eliminate. From what I've observed, she more than lives up to her reputation, Kailin said. Yes, she is indeed quite a woman, Malachi said with obvious admiration. Gabriel snorted his disapproval, but kept any further comment to himself. That seals today's tale in shadows. We hope Plato Wyngard and the Valley of the Immortals has drawn you deeper into its enigma. Return soon to Crow's Quills books, where the next chapter awaits, whispering secrets yet untold.